Здравейте, скъпи приятели, и добре дошли в поредния епизод на подкаста СловоРед. Подкаста, в който си говорим за книги. Причината някой да напише книга, причината някой да издаде книга и най-вече причината някой да прочете книга. Днес наш гост е един изключително интересен човек, който долетя буквално от другия край на света. По-далече няма как да живеят хора. Нека да ви представя госта в днешния подкаст, господин Йоост Стридом, който е водач и лидер на автономния град в ЮАР, Орания. Hello, Mr. Sтридом, and welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's wonderful to be in your country. It is, for us, breaking new ground. It's a country and the city of Sofia that we have not visited before. And for us, it's a whole new experience. It's wonderful to see your history, to meet with your people. And we've been welcomed and hosted very friendly. And I want to express my gratitude for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the kind words. We really are proud to host you because what you're doing, I think, is very important. For our viewers and listeners, could you tell them what is Orania? Why have you built this city?
Orania is, in the first place, what I would describe as a third option. In the South African context of constant struggle, there was, for the Afrikaner people, also known as the Boer people, it's our word for farmer, it's our name of our people. For us it was very challenging. We were pushed away from all sides and we needed a new option. And for this we founded Orania. So Orania has two things. On the one hand, it is an idea, a political idea, an ideological idea. But it's not only that. If it were to stop there, it would have been nothing for no one. It's also a place. It's also a home for a people. It is to create a home for the descendants of the settlers, of the French, the Dutch, the German, and a bit of English that came to the Cape and did a lot of development on the African continent. And we became one nation through many trials and wars and so on. We are what some can call the white tribe of Africa. We are not people who can go back to Europe, as it's been said to us, because we are from Africa now. We've been there for almost 400 years.
Who tells you this go back to Europe? Are those people some kind liberals who profess love for their fellow humans, or is it some other type of ideology who tells you to go back to wherever?
You might recognize the ideology. It's an internationally known ideology. It's one of hate, it's one of false equality, and it is one of, stealing in this position. It is the ideology of communism. Communist has got its tentacles into Africa. And I think it's well known that communism has influenced very bad things in Africa in the past couple of years. In South Africa, there's a party called the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which is a radical communist party chanting, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, chanting for the death of the Afrikaans-speaking white descendants of Europeans who've been living there for a long time. Why do they do this? They need to create a scapegoat, a false enemy, to set up something so that their voter base, who lives in absolute poverty and bad situations, can have someone to blame. Why? Because the also communist ANC party has been in charge since 1991 and has done very little for their people to help them to develop schools, to develop economic opportunities. So the economic and social situation in South Africa is declining. And for this reason, they need to blame someone, and they found an easy target, the only group that looks different than them. And they focused their efforts on the Afrikaner Boer people.
I need to ask you this. Those people claim to be, at least officially, anti-racist. Am I correct?
Yes.
So they are chanting, kill the whites, kill the Boers. Yeah. If you, a Boer, an Afrikaner, were to shout a similar slogan, but changing the ethnicity to something else, anything else, How long would you stay in prison during the current laws of the country?
It's very clear because there's such examples. People who've used a degrading word for black people in South Africa has gone to prison for that. Not for violence, not even calling for killing or for hate, just using a degrading word, which is not something that we do, but the people who've done it has gone to physical prison for using such a word.
And
While the courts in South Africa, even the High Court of Appeal, did not in any way condemn this behavior of the economic freedom fighters. To be honest, they said it's not hate speech.
It's not hate speech. To literally call for the murder of people based on their ethnicity and race. That's not...
So what they do is they say the context to it, it's always the key word, the context, and the context is that it's just a metaphor.
Of course.
It's a metaphor for, doing away with bad things and struggling against oppressive systems. It's not real. There's actually proof. There's a book written, Kill the Boer, by a researcher who wrote extensively about the influence of such chants in the political spectrum, how it influenced the brutal farm attacks and farm murders that we have in South Africa. Any of the viewers can just go on a web search engine like Google and just type in South Africa farm murders. And you'll see the brutality, the torture, and the sickening way that these murders are done. And it's politically influenced, no doubt about it.
So just for our viewers who don't know, the farmers, they are white farmers, they're Afrikaners, they work their land, which they paid for, and they're considered bad people and racist, and they're attacked for the color of their skin and their ethnicity, and not their individual actions as human beings.
Absolutely. To a certain sense, I would say what you can call it is a kind of a land war. It is who can dominate that space. And the approach of many Afrikaner people is to say you must work the lands, create something. And we can speak a bit about labor also later, it's an important topic. But the other side is to say people won't live on their farms any longer if it's risky for their lives. We need to fact check this, but I am quite sure that in South Africa more people died in the past year than in the war in Ukraine. We have about 70 murders every day and about 150 rapes per day.
Where is the international outrage?
That's a good question.
Okay,
but there is a solution, and maybe we should speak a bit about the solution, because what we have here is the flag of our community. A community that said, in this chaos, which is modern-day South Africa, one must strive for the solution of community.
Okay, so Africa used to have a white minority rule up until 3 decades ago. And it used to be described with this one word, apartheid, which has a very negative connotation. But from what I understand, Orania was created before apartheid fell.
Yes.
Why?
Because the intellectuals of our time, thinkers, but also doers, luckily, otherwise the community would not exist, went ahead and said, on the one hand, you have the apartheid system with the white minority rule, and they said this is not going to last, but also heavily influenced by thinkers from our history, it's also not going to be a long-term solution anyway. Even if you forget the international pressure, if you forget the local pressure, it's not a long-term sustainable solution. On the other hand, you have the system of the new South Africa, continuing this idea of the South African empire, but under ANC communist rule. And they also saw that that will be a disaster for our people, for the Afrikaner people, because we will be vilified, we will be, discriminated against, and we see this very evidently. And there's currently more laws in South Africa based on race and racial classifications than during the height of apartheid. There's 142 laws in the South African legislature about racial specifications, and it's well researched and published fact. The people of Orania, however, said the old South Africa is not going to last and it's not going to be sustainable. The new South Africa is going to outright antagonize us. We need a new solution. The new solution must be one where we can survive as a people, as a folk, as a nation, but it must also be one that is sustainable. and thus founded this idea. What is this idea? Just very shortly, it's the idea that Afrikaners, if they want to exist as a people upon themselves, they need their own piece of land. On that land, they must build their own institutions, because either the state will be antagonistic against them, deny them rights and so on, or the state will just be too incompetent to care for them. So we must build our own schools, our own churches, our own institutions, our own economy, our own chambers of commerce, our own colleges and training centers and so on, our own electricity providers. It's things we must build. It's own institutions, so we have own land, own institutions. And the third one, fundamental shift in Afrikaner thinking. It is the idea of own labor. So what you have in South Africa is still a system where cheap black labor is very available, and you can make quite a good economic success, even if in the challenging circumstances in South Africa, where there's racial laws and BEE, which is black economic empowerment, which forces you to get a black partner if your business grows to a certain extent, which forces certain hiring quotas in your company and so on. Even with all that negative things that deny economic growth, typical communist thinking, even with all that, it's still possible to make a living because of the cheap cost of labor. The founders of Orania understood that there's a deep inherent tie between labor and demographics. If you do not do your own work, you will become a demographic minority in your own country. And if you're a demographic minority, either it's minority rule, which is not sustainable, or you are the victim of demographic realities. So in Orania, you can see on our flag, rolling up his sleeves is this symbol of Orania to say we have our own piece of land, we have our own institutions, but we also do every bit of our own work. That was the vision of the founding fathers of Orania. They saw this already in the 70s and the 80s, when apartheid was still very strong. You know, it was the strongest military in Africa, 17th largest economy in the world, strong country. These people foresaw that there was going to be problems, and they started solving those problems even before it was necessary to do so, and to create a place that can stand in justice. So the Orania idea was born, just very shortly, settling people in a demographically empty space. It's a desert-like area in South Africa, but with a large river close to it as well. So you have a low-developed, demographically empty space, which you can fill with Afrikaner people, so that they're demographically a majority in their own space, and thus make their own decisions.
I do have to ask you this about the founding fathers of Orania. They were old enough to see what happened in their northern neighbor, Rhodesia.
Yes.
Would you say that what happened to Rhodesia was a warning call for them? And I assume they have read the book Bitter Harvest that explains the whole situation by the former Prime Minister of Rhodesia.
Yeah, Bitter Harvest and The Great Betrayal are both famous books in South Africa. I think they saw that, but they also saw Angola, they also saw Zambia, they also saw Mozambique, they also saw many of the other countries, Namibia. All of the countries, what happened in the 60s is the so-called winds of change were blowing through Africa, and decolonization happened. And that was just changed or overtook by communist interest, corruption, so-called democracies, but in the worst possible positions. Now you have two things. You have a combination of people seeing this horrible new systems is going to deny us rights, pursuit to happiness, right to property, all the important things, but it's also going to take our neighbors by storm. On the other hand, they saw visionary almost that the apartheid system is also not going to work. There's an interesting book, I think it's only published in Afrikaans, it's called Stryd van die Ordes, or The Battle of the Different Orders, which look at the different big systems, communism, liberalism, and nationalism. It's written by an Afrikaner theological professor. Very interesting perspective. Maybe it's published in English as well. But to see through all these things happening in the 20th century, you need to look at the new vision, our new vision, as an answer to these challenges, not communism. And apartheid, he was unable to continue and could not in a just way continue. And that was the Orania idea, a third option, a new beginning, a community-based solution. So yeah, I think they did see the challenges and armored themselves with the necessary tools to continue.
where did they draw inspiration about the internal rules of Orania? Because from what I've heard, I can draw some ideas. I think they were looking at Switzerland, at Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, maybe even Israel, other republics with strong civic virtues. Where could you say the founding fathers of Orania looked for ideas?
Oh, they looked everywhere, I must say. There's some books that we have written by from the early Orania thinkers, like A Homeland for the Afrikaner People. That's a book written by Dr. Chris Hüz. I don't think you'll find it in print, but when you visit Orania, maybe I can give you a copy, where he looked at different models, the canton system in Switzerland, the Israeli model, especially more in relation to farming and settlement of people, farming in a desert, because we're in a similar situation. They looked at the Bantustans of the previous regime. They looked at many different models, because we were so desperate to find some way of doing this. In a sense, they've been very widely influenced, I think, from our own history. We as Afrikaners like to create republics. Everywhere we've created republics, and so many of them didn't survive. However, the Republic of the Transvaal and the Free State is quite famous. They did survive. So all of these, I think, gave inspiration to the Orania idea.
Have you ever considered the possibility of not a republic, but a monarchy with a king? Or is this way beyond your ethical and ideological ideas?
Afrikaners have the saying, no king but Christ. So it's not something that will sit well with us. We are not a monarchist people. We haven't been for a long time. And we have always had problems with big institutions of power. Our own churches has betrayed us more than once, and we are Protestant people. And we are a bit skeptical about big institutions of power. Our own governments have betrayed us, and that is from we, as Huguenots and Protestant, had to flee Europe for our Protestant faith. It has happened when we left the Cape of Good Hope in search of new territories and to build the republics. It's happened when the British attacked us in multiple wars and ruled over us in the tyrannical Union of South Africa. And then we got our freedom again, and then again we lost everything in 1994. So we're very skeptical about big institutions of power, and for this we prefer a republic and Protestant churches.
Thank you. Mr. Stridom, while I was preparing for your visit to Bulgaria, I did what every person with access to the internet did. I started to read about the history of the Boers. And I stumbled upon some very interesting facts. During the two wars that the farmers fought against the British Empire, there were actually Bulgarian volunteers. So in the 50,000 strong Boer army, there were some 2,600 foreign volunteers, and we have 100% confirmed, documented, up to 60 not well documented Bulgarians from the three regions of Bulgaria, Macedonia, Mysia, and Thrace, who went to the other side of the world to fight. And this is published in this book, Bulgarian Historical Review from 2024. And the author is actually not a Bulgarian, but a Russian. So it's a very interesting book. I would like to gift you this.
Thank you very much.
So the reason why Bulgarians went to the other side of the world was they felt that they, as an agricultural society back then, were very close in life to the Boer. And they were fighting a big empire, the British Empire. And this was one of the first modern wars. Yeah. Your ancestors invented the concept of commando and guerrilla tactics. And this was something that we, preparing for a war with the Ottoman Empire, wanted to get as much information as possible because in a few years we were going to use this. So 100 years ago, there was a lot of interest in Bulgarian society. about what's happening with the Boers. Even our national poet, Ivan Vazov, wrote several poems and even a play in which he talks about the Boers, their struggles and everything. But it seems that over the last 100 years, our cultural connections have rather withered. What we do know is that in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, Bulgaria, as part of the Soviet bloc, actually helped your enemies with revolutions. But now we're, I think, on the same side of history.
I hope so. As I said earlier, we had a good first meeting during the Anglo-Boer. I believe it's the first, and we had a bad second one, and I think now the third one will also be a good meeting, yes. So the Anglo-Boer War, I think it inspired people, or we actually speak about the Freedom Wars. It's not just two parties fighting one another with the British and the Boers just being equal partners in conflict. No, it was an empire with doing the things that empires want to do, and that's to control and take for themselves, and against the people defending themselves with no professional army, or very, very, very small professional police officers and a few cannoneers, but mostly just volunteers, people from civil society, mostly farmers who've been called up to service as burghers, as citizens to defend against the British. And I think they inspired the world for two reasons, inspiring foreign fighters, including the Irish, some Hungarians, some Bulgarians, French, Dutch, German, many others. Because on the one hand, the values, that's the Reformed faith and the Republican ideal to which we stuck and we did not give 1 inch. And the other is because of our enemies. People didn't like the British very much, so any enemy of the British were a friend of the Boers, So that was the two main reasons, but it was a very interesting time and a very definitive time in our history. We won the first war against all odds, and we did very well in the beginning of the second one. Unluckily, there were more English soldiers than the total population of our people, women, children, everything, elderly included, just coming to South Africa. And with brute force, one of our generals said, we were never militarily won. We were just by sheer numbers trampled, and we built a monument called Wounded but Not Defeated. So from there, basically we lost everything. The women and children were put in concentration camps. Also, I think one of the first modern uses of that.
I think that's the invention of the concentration camp.
About just shy of 30,000 women and children died in those camps, and many others lived in horrific situations. Our people were heartbroken after that, and we had to rebuild. It's actually a very interesting part of our history, how we rebuilt, creating civil organizations that uplift one another and create educational opportunities and so on. So interesting part of our history. Looking forward to read this.
So you do consider yourselves direct descendants of the two republics. They live in your hearts.
Absolutely.
And those ideals are still there.
You can see some of the colors of those flags. We have the Freedom flag, we have the Transvaal flag and the Free State flag. Blue, white and orange, or then red is very evident in those flags. We don't have the green, which is also evident in them. But in Orania's flag and our community's flag, we use that colors, and we changed it a bit and put our own symbol on it. But that's definitely so that, that history lives on.
So what you've built is a tiny republic, more or less, even if it's an autonomous part of South Africa. It is a mini republic. You've obviously put a lot of thought into the process of creating this new society, but what is a society without the education of the children? You do have a lot of children in the city. What do you teach them?
That's a very interesting question. I want to answer it in 3 ways. Firstly, I want to say something about the history of education of our children. Secondly, and I'm going to try and keep it short, I want to say something about the South African system of education. And thirdly, the Orania systems. 1. Because we were constantly on the move, the French Huguenots and the Dutch coming to South Africa, the church didn't formally come with them. They had to restart the Protestant.
When you say the church, you mean the Catholic Church or the Protestant?
No, well, the
Anglican Church.
There was no formal church institutions very early on. You know, it had to be almost rebuilt. And then when we did the Great Trek, the church actually condemned us moving away from the British Empire in the early days, and so on. So what we did is we constantly had to have the church in terms of not a building, as we were today in a building of many hundreds of years old. We didn't have that. We were constantly moving. So the church was the deacons, the elders, and the what do you call it? The reverend.
The parish.
Yeah, and so on, and always on the move. And as did the educational facilities not come with us. So it was basically a large system of homeschooling. And there's a book, Trap de Jeugd, the education of the youth. And it was Dutch-based. And the women taught the children while we were moving with oxen wagon into the inlands. That created a way of thinking. And that way of thinking is the very basic ideas of statehood and of the Reformed faith is the principles of education for us. So they actually did a very good job. And in the big monument that we built commemorating the Great Trek, which is kind of the formation of our national identity, they built this and it's, you know, honoring the warriors and everything, but there's a very big part of the big statue, which is a woman, a wife with her children with her, a boy and a girl, and she's educating them. Why? Because that brought civilization with us. There were many hunting and warring parties that moved in, but when we brought the women with and they could teach the children, that's how you took civilization into the inlands of South Africa. I wanted to refer to that because why is that important? It was not the state, it was not state funded, it was not according to some law, it was teaching the kids what they reckoned to be important for the kids to learn. And that was a good foundation when we created the two republics, the Free State and the Transvaal, for the development of educational, legal, administrative and state systems. So that was the first box I wanted to tick. The second one is the current South African system. Obviously, South Africa is demographically not very friendly to us. 80 Afrikaners are about 2 million people in a country of more than 60 million. If you count the illegal immigrants, about 66 million, I think. So we're a very small minority, also not very popular and very easily identifiable. So the educational system actually refers to colonization, the apartheid system and so on over and over and again. And it vilifies Afrikaners. Even those born long after apartheid ended, 10 years after apartheid, is still being vilified. That's not good. But the state accredits everything. Why is that the case? Well, that's also important. We made a mistake as Afrikaners when we were in power. One of the things that we did wrong is to entrust all our education to the state. We built wonderful schools with volunteers. We built it with money that we privately raised. We did fundraising events. We built tremendous schools, high quality schools. And what did we do? We entrusted it to the almighty state. And when the state changed, who took control of our educational facilities? The new state.
I have to ask you this.
Communist state.
If I were to, let's say, change my mind, I want to go to South Africa and do a baccalaureate or something higher education at the moment, would I get the same quality of education I would have 20 or 30 years ago?
No. No question about it. And there's a lot of global ranking systems that can prove that, how it went downhill. I think universities in general worldwide went downhill quite bad. But I don't think there's the progression that people think there is. I think there's actually a bit of regression. The university as a model has become more economically focused than it is education in the broad spectrum. Why did the old universities have Latin and poetry and math and everything for everyone? It was to educate the mind. Now the thinking is to educate you for a job. So,
Really?
I think internationally that's the case.
Well, if I were to study a baccalaureate of arts, what kind of job am I being prepared for?
Well, that's also not a kind of course that universities make a lot of money with. They prefer students that study things like bookkeepers, specialized bookkeepers, legalists and so on. I actually have a good article on that. It's written in Afrikaans. I think there's an English version available. How the soul of the university changed to support business rather than the education of the mind in the times of great thinkers of philosophy, the great universities. So there's something I'll definitely share with you. It's written by an Afrikaans philosopher. But I wanted to say is the level of education definitely dropped because just of the sheer incompetence of the policies that we have based on race. So a certain amount of students need to be a certain color, a certain amount of lecturers need to be a certain color. It's not based on merit, but on racial preferences. So that's the one thing. So as Afrikaners, we entrusted everything to the state, university, schools, anything. And when the state, that single point of failure, when that fell, we lost control over our schools. We tried to keep a bit of control, but recently, the new government, also not that new anymore, but the communist ANC government changed the way that parents can be involved in schools. There were two foundational negotiatory pillars when the power in South Africa changed. The one is the right to property, the other is the right to education. And this was part of the deal when negotiations happened in the 90s. Both of these pillars has now been cut down. The expropriation without compensation of property is passed from a bill to an act, and the Bella Bill is also passed. The Bella Bill means it is taking parents out of the control of the schools and giving it fully to the state.
So this is why you made your own schools, made your own university, so you have full control over what your children are being taught, so they have normal professions, so they're knowledgeable, and they have good prospects further in life.
We try. However, sadly, we are not as autonomous as we would like to be. We would like to be free. We are still bound by the bounds of the South African state, including the accreditation of tertiary and secondary educational institutions, meaning that they can take away our accreditation. So we find ways around it, and we find ways to keep going and so on, but the state still, they have the key to the door. So what we've done is Solidarity built Academia, a private Afrikaans university. Orania has built BKO, Bokero Opleiding, which is specifically for Afrikaners, a place where they can learn technical skills, and we've built 2 high schools in Orania itself. But we still need to fulfill the accreditation needs of the state. So one of the ways that we give the kids a bit more is to do the basic requirements for accreditation, but to add upon that culture, history, and so on, which we see relevant for the children of Orania.
A very hot topic in Bulgaria right now is we're discussing on a state level, should the kids have as part of their curriculum religious education? Now, this is very broadly saying, because we're still discussing, first, if we're going to have it, and second, what exactly is going to be in there, because we have Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Shia, Sunni, and it's going to be like, what exactly are we going to teach the kids? So, do you have religious education in Orania? Do you have religious education in South Africa? And what do you teach the children in those lessons?
So the religious education in South African schools changed a lot since, I was in school. As far as I know, they have something like religious studies, which is a broad overview about the different religions from a very kind of secular standpoint. In Orania, the 2 schools have different ways of dealing with it. The one is a bit more informal, but training the kids in religious terms as well. The other one is very formal. It's a required subject to learn our Calvinist Protestant faith, the basic pillars of it, how it works. And they also have extracurricular activities like Bible knowledge, quizzes, and things like that, in which the kids compete on a national level against one another. So there's definitely that. I want to say that the moment you entrust the state with religious training, they very much like a communist way of thinking, because it's the state. They have to represent everyone. And what they do is they bring it down to the lowest common denominator, which is so vague, so generic, it's not good. I would rather say follow the Orania model. A community, a church or a community or a village must take more responsibility for training the children and less responsibility for the state. I don't think you can trust the state very much.
So, the present state of South Africa has a very diverse mix of both ethnicities, races, and religions. Do you think people of different religions can safely coexist, or is diversity plus proximity not the best idea from your experience, from your worldview?
Well, what we see in South Africa is different beliefs lead to different worldviews. Different worldviews lead to kind of a clash of civilizations. What you have in South Africa is a group of people who pray to their ancestors, a group of Christians, a group of secular, a group of atheists, and many other. Some of the local traditional beliefs, horrible things happen. You've got this creation of muti, for which they sometimes use human parts, and kids get kidnapped for this. But just the basic foundation sometimes is different worldviews. Different ways of viewing legal systems. One group of people think this is the correct way to deal with this injustice is this way. Other group believe in due process and innocence before being proven guilty, or whatever more Western way of thinking. So it's so different. It's such a clash that it is problematic, and that is why power should be devolved so that people can believe their own things. Have you ever heard about a country which claims to have 12 official languages? I mean, it's not possible. And it's not only the official languages that exist in South Africa. There are many more. There are many tribes. There are many groups. There are many religions. So the problem with that is the worldviews clash, and when the worldviews clash, you have just different beliefs set up against one another. That's not necessarily good.
Thank you. So Orania has existed for 3 decades now. It's time-tested, it's proven it works. It's growing, 15% growth of population per year. Let's talk about your plans for the future. Let's say I'm an HR. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, freer than today, let me put it that way. What we have is a system or a perspective that we call growing self-determination. And that is partly because, we are in a situation where we don't have the means to be physically independent on the one hand. On the other hand, we are still very much influenced by the rest of the country and the national government, to which we still have to pay tax and so on. So it's not a question of snapping your fingers and you're in a better position. You have to build it every day. What we see is a lot of people in South Africa, conservative, good Afrikaner people, who are dreamers, and they say this is how the future must work. These must be the set of rules. This must be the government system. This must be the way that we have religion. This must be the way that we treat security or whatever. But they don't physically build it. They just imagine it and have heated discussions on social media about it. I think
the talkers.
The talkers. But they get very angry if you say, well, this is practical reality. And I think the advantage that the people of Orania have, and we're not better than anyone else, we want to work together with other groups and so on, but we have this advantage that we started. I used the metaphor, we are in an aeroplane. The aeroplane is already in the air, but we're still figuring out how to build it and how to maintain it. It's not a perfect system. I think it works well for us, but one of the keys of Orania's success is that it's not everything for everyone. Referring back to our previous example of religion and training it in school, trying to be everything for everyone will leave you with being nothing for no one. And Orania is not that. We're not everything for everyone. We have a specific thing that we cater for, and that helps it to work. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, when you feel the tense grip of reality upon your community, you reconsider this and you try to do that, but you must stay with your basic values. So when I say in 5 years, we must be freer than today. We must grow our economy. We must grow our political recognition. We must come to friends in Bulgaria and many other countries, whether that be the West or the East or the USA or wherever, and get more recognition for our people and for our cause so that we can progress politically as well. And then we must grow our educational institutions. We must grow opportunities for our people. So that is what we see. How exactly it will look, I'm not sure. Maybe the need will come because of the pressure in South Africa that we must be a fully independent republic. Maybe there's some kind of confederate or federal system that we can agree on and have a free future, but I'm not sure how it will look. I personally like the idea of a republic. It's something that is very attractive to me, but we must also deal with reality. So to progress our plan, it is crawling self-determination. Crawling up this hill, leopard crawling up this hill, and sometimes it's painful, but we must progress in that sense.
The reason why I'm asking you this is if you look at the map of South Africa, there is a country within the borders of South Africa, which is only one country in the world in such a situation besides the Vatican. And it is the small monarchy of Lesotho, which is quite close actually to where Orania is. Do you have good relations with Lesotho? Or what are your relations with this small country?
We don't have particular specific relations. Our historical relations with the people of that area, I can think of the Barulong people, for example, and the Basotho people, is both good and bad. There was many instances of cattle theft, for example, in our history, where they came over the border of the Free State and so on. There were also acts of cooperation between the Boer people in the Free State Republic and those people. I think they even went to war at one stage with the Barulong combined to someone else. So on and off relationship. We also are not looking to make any more enemies, but we don't have any official liaison with Lesotho as a country. There's also now Eswatini. I know it as Swaziland. It's something similar. That is the de jure recognized places. Now I must say something. The Orania strategy is to say de facto is sometimes more important than de jure. Recognition without meaning is worth less than no recognition that's actually filled with meaning. What do I mean when I say this? We build de facto realities on the ground. If you have food independence, food security, you have electrical independence, you have educational independence, but you're not recognized fully as an independent space. And the other country are recognized, but they are dependent education, dependent electric, they're dependent politically, they're dependent economically. Which one is more free, practically?
Those are some excellent questions we Europeans need to ask ourselves.
Yes.
But my question is this. There are a lot of people who look at the borders of the world and say anyone who goes against the current borders is a villain because these are good borders. And those exact same people say the borders in Africa are bad because Europeans draw them without any consideration for the people who live and how they're broken down. One community is in 2-3 countries. Do you think Africa has a future of better borders, better aligned across ethnic lines, not just South Africa, Africa as a continent?
Excellent question. So you have two main ways of thinking about it. The one is the Pan-Africanist view, open all the borders. I do not agree with this view. I think there can be more cooperation between the states and so on. I think the situation in Africa is so dire that people will just flock to the big economic sectors and it will create chaos. Then there's the other option. I personally am not a big fan of the current borders, specifically the South African context. Why? Well, it didn't change that long ago. In the 80s, 90s, we lost the previous territory of ours, which we sadly fought the Germans for. We were on the British command, and we fought the Germans for the area that was German Southwest Africa, now Namibia, and that was part of South Africa. So our borders changed quite recently. Before that, in 1910, our borders was defined by the British Empire. We were a collection of different people. So you had in the Cape, you had the Cape Town area, the Cape of Good Hope, which was then a British colony. You had Natal, which was a British colony. And then you had the monarchies of the Zulus and the Xhosa people. And then you had Afrikaner republics, and you had groups of nomadic people that traveled around. Different people, different languages, different religions, different worldviews in their own areas, managing their own affairs. Then the British came and said, listen, here's a mine, here's a mine, here's a mine. We need rail tracks like this into this harbour. So why not consolidate all of this in one country? Much more economically efficient, right? And that created the borders of current South Africa. If you are asking if a redraw of borders along ethnic or lingual lines could happen, I think it could. But I think it's already happening, just not on world maps, just very practically de facto on the ground. Communities becoming stronger. I think the future of South Africa will have a deterioration of the central state to a point where there's only two points of stability. The one point of stability, in quotation marks, is that of warlords. They keep their area stable, whether it's criminal, whether it's a warlord, a gang, they keep their area and their version of stability. That is not good, but they rule over their sectors. The other option for stability, or the real option of stability, is communities. People who just dominate their own area, manage their own area, work their own area, care for their own area. And that is the true stability. The violent way of a warlord is not true stability. It seems like stability because it's like an empire. He grabs the area under his control, but a community is true stability. And I think that will practically, de facto maybe, to an extent, redraw the borders.
So that's the ideology that Orania is built upon. Community, home for the Afrikaner people, and a vision, a long-term vision for the future. But we know that Africa is changing. Africa is a continent because 70, 80 years ago it was ruled by European colonial powers. They mostly left. The Soviet Union tried to interfere. The United States tried to interfere. Now we have a new player, China. Now we have BRICS. Now we have the European Union. Now we have new geopolitical player. We have India. Do you think Africa, with all the projections about its exploding family, might create a new center of power within the 21st century?
I have an eerie feeling about that. I don't know exactly how it will play out, but we see that there's a new scramble for Africa happening. The Chinese are investing millions and millions of dollars in infrastructure, and what do? They build it. On debts, and those debts get repaid by mineral rights, mining rights, things like that. And the governments in African countries, they say it's good because they get a lot of money and investment and so on. On the other hand, we're seeing, Russia, so it's Russia-China influence. We see a lot of Asian settlement now, practically just population settlement in Africa. And then we also see that the United States is now looking at Africa because BRICS are becoming quite strong. So it's a very complex situation. I've got no idea how it really will play out geopolitically. There's so many possibilities. It's really hard to say this is what's going to happen or that. In that chaos, I think people like the Afrikaners or even of the other tribes must build their communities to be anti-fragile, to withstand that kind of
Anti-fragile, you've read Nicholas Nassim Taleb.
I know about the ideas, yes.
All right. It's very interesting thinker. But I have to ask you this. You mentioned resources. You cannot have a modern economy without resources. Yes. And Orania is, correct me if I'm wrong, 14 to 15,000 hectares of land at the moment. That's arable land plus the urban area.
Yeah.
As far as you know, on this land, are there any resources? Because in the mind of the average Bulgarian, South Africa has diamonds, has gold, has all of those shiny, very expensive things. You don't have those, or oil, or gas, or something like that. You have.
We made a
labor.
very big mistake in the end of the 19th century, and that was in our republics we discovered gold and diamonds. We will not make that mistake again. Now, on a more serious note, so that really led to the wars against the English, and obviously the South African gold and diamond and other resources are just flowing out of Africa, and we get very little for that. But I must say this, Orania, I don't think it's got any underground resources. So everyone that had their hopes up to come invade us for such will waste their time. Our only resource will be agricultural and people, human resources, to say what can we produce, what can we create, what can we think, what intellectual property can we create, and that's what we will have to export. I don't think we'll have much else.
I have to ask you this. Anyone who cares about the future plants a tree. You went into the desert, or semi-desert land, and you're trying to terraform this barren wasteland. How are your efforts repaying you? Do you think there would be lush forests in like 10, 15 years?
I can definitely say it won't be in 10, 15 years. It's a harsh environment. And I will say this, I know you Orthodox probably don't like Martin Luther all that much, but he said, if I knew the world will end tomorrow, I will plant an apple tree today. And I think Afrikaners planting trees in South Africa where land expropriation is looming, where corruption and crime and so on is totally out of hand, the fact that Afrikaners are planting trees is very encouraging. So there's still faith. What I will say is this, we've gone through a lot of efforts to just plant a lot of trees. We have water available, it's just very expensive to pump because you need electricity to pump it from the river. So I remember as a kid the massive storms of dust, the crazy heat. It's already changing. It's not so visible yet, but in the Orania urban center, it's definitely a fact, according to my subjective personal experience, that it's changing, that the wind is a bit more manageable, not so much dust anymore as in the early days. The heat is a bit more manageable. So these are things that I think already is influenced by the trees. We have big plantations of pecan trees. As I said, agriculture is one of our only resources. We don't have gold and diamonds and oil and gas. So those are things that's very positive to me. And I think if we can have a project where we plant more and more and more, we will definitely change our local environment. You add shade, you add leaves that fall from the trees and natural material into the ground. Water retention is better. You change your environment by planting trees. It's critically important for us.
So you're fighting against the desert, not just against human oppression.
No.
And I actually saw a post on your Facebook page that you're exporting apples from Orania to Southeast Asia. How did you manage to get that?
We do pecan nuts. Pecan nuts is what we export. In South Africa, apples are exported, but pecan nuts. So pecan nuts, our climate is actually okay for pecan nut growth, and it's also something that you can mechanize. We spoke about own labor, we do our own work. So it's a process that you can mechanize with automated and with tractors and so on. So these nuts get exported primarily to China. They are big. There's a big market there for pecan nuts, so obviously it gets sold there. It's a very good nut, and that's also, I'll send you some pictures of how it changed when we built infrastructure to bring water to some of these arid areas. Adding the water, the effect that it had, just when we started planting trees, and now 20, 30 years later, the trees are big and luscious, and it creates a bit of a forest-like environment on those farms, which is very, very good for us.
I like your vision of the future. It's very green, and your message seems to be full of hope, which is something we kind of need. And this is why I'm very thankful for your visit to Bulgaria, for your lecture, for joining us in this podcast, because what we really need is to see that life really has hope, and there's something you can do about it, and you can just roll your sleeves and work.
If you are concerned about the future, create it.
Благодаря ви много, че бяхте с днешния подкаст. Това беше нашия гост, господин Стридом. Не забравяйте да натиснете камбанката и да станете абонати на нашия канал.